Hello and welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today. And if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend because, it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going.
All right. Hello and welcome everyone to today's EcoCast. I'm excited to examine today's topic, defense in depth, exploring the elements of a layered security program. In the complex modern threat environment, relying on a single security measure simply isn't enough. Today on the EcoCast, we'll be examining the key components of a layered security program designed to provide comprehensive protection for your organization's assets. Our presenters are going to be shedding light on integrating multiple security measures such as firewalls, endpoint protection, identity management, threat detection, and bundle that all up to create a cohesive defense strategy. The evolving challenge of achieving a deep level of defense is a tough one, but luckily we have speakers from Rubrik, Druva, CyberArk, and Simulate joining us today, as well as the fantastic keynote presentation from Evgeny Karam, who will ensure you leave today's session with practical approaches to reducing vulnerabilities, mitigating risks, and enhancing response capabilities across all layers of your security stack. I imagine that you're all ready and pumped up to begin, and we have a boatload of information to share with you today. So why don't we just cover off a few last bits of info, and then we're going to get our speakers on out here with us. So, as way of introduction, my name is Mackenzie Puddesy, and I am your moderator here from Actual Tech Media today. I also have my friends and fellow moderators, Jess Steinbach, Scott Becker, and Keith Ward here with us on live chat as well. And in more exciting news, we have got some big prizes today. Yes, we have 3 $300 Amazon gift cards up for grabs, so that is going to be pretty exciting. A reminder that you must be present and live with us here on the EcoCast to win. And as mentioned in that housekeeping video, you can find the full T's and C's linked in the handouts tab if you have any questions about that. Now, why don't we talk a little bit about the console? You've all probably seen the questions tab, but if you haven't found that yet, why don't you just click in there and give a little hi, hello, hola, bonjour, or whatever greeting you want to give today to everyone else there in the audience and get some energy and excitement flowing around in today's webinar session. You may need to expand the questions and handouts window to get a better view of that. And of course, we can also find the handouts tab nestled in that same window. So if you were looking for those T's and C's and you were completely lost, that is where you're going to find that. Additionally, this is where you're going to find all of the handouts from our teams presenting today. So these are additional links or PDFs, follow-up information, resources that we're going to be calling out and referencing during today's presentations. But if you want to be a keener and grab all of those now, well, of course, you can do that as well. You definitely don't want to sleep on those because you don't always find those easily after today's presentation. The final thing I want to announce is that in February, the Actual Tech webinars will have a new and improved user interface. I believe some of you may have already experienced this week as we've been rolling it out, but as of February, it'll all be looking fun and flashy. We're going to have some new bells and whistles in the console, and you'll also be receiving newly templated emails when you sign up for our webinars or get day of reminders that the event is starting. So we want to let you know in case the change makes any of you suspicious. You don't want a phishing email showing up. So that is to be expected, a little bit of a facelift there, and to also get you excited for some of those new fun features that we'll be rolling out. All right, and with that, I think that is everything in terms of housekeeping, and we are ready to get the show on the road. Now, let's get things kicked off, as I mentioned, with our keynote speaker. If you haven't already heard from Evgeny on perhaps one of our expert series or somewhere else in the IT and tech sphere, you're in for a treat. Evgeny Karam is the co-founder of Security Architecture Podcast, and he is going to be presenting today on this topic to get things opened up. So, Evgeny, feel free to introduce yourself and kick things off.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Very happy to be here today. We'll talk about very important topic and very dear to my heart as well, defense in depth. I think it's uber important and fundamental to cybersecurity, security program in general. Who I am, I'm Yevgeny. I've been around for quite a long time, more than 20 years of experience in cybersecurity in IT, did a variety of stuff in cybersecurity, worked with VARs, MSSPs, wrote a book, and many other different things. And today, as mentioned, we'll talk about defense in depth. So think about this. If you ever saw a presentation from 15, 20 years ago about network security and perimeter, as it used to be before, there was usually some kind of example of a castle when you have a water, you have a fence, you have a bridge, you have many, many different layers to get to the heart of the castle. Guess what? While the perimeter, as we know, doesn't exist anymore, the idea still there. Because while our information is in SaaS, information in IaaS, in a different cloud, it doesn't mean to get to one point or capture one part will get you access to the entire organization. And if you build your defenses in smart, correct way, that people will not able to get everything from you, even if they only capture one point. We have this idea in the industry when we say that we're supposed to be right all the time and the bad guys know. So even if we do one mistake, that's it, we're done. Not always the truth. Of course, depend on type of the mistakes. But if the bad guys were able to get into your environment, it doesn't mean they can spread everywhere. If you build network segmentation, if you realize what they can or cannot do, if you have multiple controls in your environment, like network security, endpoint security, cloud security, data security, DLP, definitely human element of procedures and controls and playbooks as well. How does it look in more, I guess, technologies like this will look something like that. We have many different domains. There's probably more than 40 domains right now. This is the main one we have. And the reason why we need so many, because our data is everywhere. We are everywhere. And unfortunately, the bad guys are evolving all the time. And there is many, many different threats that exist on the wild. I'm not going to read all of them. You may be familiar with some, or some of them are relatively new, like the quantum part. We were talking about this for a long time, but now it's become something people start thinking about it more. Supply chain attacks been on the news for the last several years, and we see many, many organizations understanding what they need to do to evolve and make sure they're not there. Here's some other examples of threats that we exist today, and unfortunately, we need to defend against them and protect against them as well. If you look on what was, I don't know, 20 years ago, this was a firewall. This is basically what we had in the past and how people will basically protect their environment. No longer the case. And I mentioned before, we have a layer of defense. So let's explain what I mean by this. An idea of kill chain was invented probably around 10 years ago, maybe a bit even more, and it will show you different phases of attack, how people get into your environment. They need to research, they need to understand what is there. The days where everything is located in one file, for example, if somebody want to put a virus on your device and they just send you the virus and it delete everything on your laptop, doesn't exist anymore. It's all going on bite sizes where each component of the attack doing something else. And this is the way how the bad guys can go under the radar. The kill chain was really, really good, but something happened and we evolved to much more. MITRE came out in 2015 non-profit organization, they started to go much deeper on the techniques and the attacks when they explain different attacks that going with these parts as well. And what they did, they expanded the kill chain, and now we call it unified kill chain in a way. If you see here, we move from 7 to probably 15 right now. And I think one of the important part is the exploitation and the delivery of the malware, the ransomware, the attack, the payload itself. But we can actually layer technology. Our technologies will be done if we do it smartly to be able to protect on the entire level of kill chain. People after me will come over and explain how their technology does it, how they align to MITRE, how they protect your environment, not just in one point, in many of the parts of the attacks to make sure, if God forbid, you got infected with malware or somebody was able to breach your defenses, you are not done. You need to close the business. You can still recover. This includes backup, for example. If you want to geek out and go even deeper, this is how the MITRE attack framework looks like. And there is so much information there that it's probably impossible to put on one slide, but definitely suggest to go and check. A couple of years ago, MITRE went to show a new way called the MITRE Defend, not just to show you how the bad guys can get into your environment, but also how to protect your environment and how different vendors can map to this point as well. We're still in the evolution of this framework, but I think it's going to be very, very important in the upcoming years. In the common environment, if you look on how many vendors we have, remember the first slide with the one firewall and maybe an antivirus later on. Right now, we have probably more than 50 vendors in a medium enterprise. Large enterprise may have 100 vendors or 150 vendors as well. Definitely not so simple when we take to account cloud, network security, endpoint security, SOC, SIEM, threat intelligence, and much, much more. And another part that not always discussed is IAM, identity and access management. If I have amazing tools for network security, cloud, endpoint, but I don't really have a good onboarding, I don't really know where's my privilege IDs, it's a kind of a different part of cyber and honestly became very important for last 5 6 years, while it was important before as well, but it became more important as well because right now when we talk about the perimeter, we're less starting with network controls, we're starting with who you are, from where you're coming, and only then layering the network and other controls. So definitely vaulting, where is your IDs, what are you doing? And I know CyberArk will talk about this later as well, is definitely important in my mind when we're talking about layered defense and defense in that. And lastly, before we move to the other people, I want to talk about the human element. We can have amazing controls, but if we don't build procedures, policies, doing exercise, doing training for our people, creating playbooks and escalation procedures, all these fancy controls will not work. Thank you very much, and I hope people after me will go much in depth and you learned a lot today. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Evgeny. Great chat as always, so concise, such like a great linear overview on this topic. And well, if you're on the audience there and you are thinking about defense in depth, how you want to set things up, if you're looking to kind of change up your strategy, implement some new or update your existing IT solutions at your company, well, we have a poll just to kind of get a level check where all of you are at. So is this something you're looking to do in the next 6 months? Is this something you're looking to do in kind of 6 to 12 months within the year here? Or are you a little bit further out, maybe 12 to 24 months timeline? Or perhaps you're not sure. You're here to learn, to get a better sense of what's new, what's evolving in the space. And then from there, you're able to make some further decisions and keep moving ahead from there. I'm going to leave this poll open for just a quick second more. And then I'm going to get our first speaker out here on stage with us. First up in our queue is the team from Rubrik. I'm very excited. Our friends from Rubrik are back in the house, and as I said, ready to kick things off. So without further ado, why don't we do just that? We've got Zoltan Diak, who is the Director of Product Marketing over at Rubrik, joining us today. And basically, I'm just going to kick things over to you, to Zoltan, and let you do a little bit of a deeper dive on what you do, who you are, and then get in on this topic. So take it away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, and my name is Zoltan Diak, and I work on our security capabilities here at Rubrik. And today, I'm here to talk about defense in depth. At Rubrik, our mission is to secure the world's data. So I have a lot of conversations with customers about that data, specifically about protecting and securing that data. And the conversations almost always start off with preventing threats. How can I detect and prevent more threats faster across an ever-expanding IT landscape with adversaries that are becoming more and more sophisticated and attacks that are coming at greater volumes than ever? And it's a great conversation to have. We talk about different systems that organizations are implementing to secure their on-prem, cloud, or SaaS environments, and different strategies and frameworks that those companies are utilizing to prevent those threats. And inevitably, as we talk through this, it becomes a defense in depth conversation, because no one security system can do it all, right? Enterprise organizations tend to run somewhere between 50 to 75 different security tools. And of course, there's overlap across those. And I love looking at the kill chain as a framework for these types of discussions. It helps us understand and break down different things around how defense in depth works. How should it work, right? The idea behind defense in depth was breaking down a cyber attack into different phases and finding a means to disrupt every single phase of those attacks. So security organizations have a lot of great tools at their disposal now to, across the entire kill chain, across reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, and command and control. We have those 50 to 75 different tools, right? And, that's somewhere in between network security, cloud security, endpoint security, and other more point solutions. And I always ask the question, which of these tools is about defending your data specifically? All of these tools are really about preventing unauthorized access to your infrastructure. So there's nothing that has a sense of what your high value data is, your sensitive or regulated data. There's nothing that has a sense of where that data is or who has access to it. And when you look at the last stage, impact or action from objective, literally where the bad guys land and lay hands on your data, encrypt it, steal it, destroy it, whatever the case might be, there's virtually nothing in terms of capabilities you can use to prevent or disrupt the last stage. If we're not doing anything about that, our defense in depth simply isn't going deep enough. And this neglect of security at the data level is more important now than ever. Your data is growing faster than ever, and it's growing across those on-prem, cloud, and SaaS environments at record rates. Requirements for transparency of sensitive data breaches is increasing, as well as the fines behind them, as governments try to push private industry to invest more in securing their customers' private data. The number of attacks targeting data is increasing along with those things, as adversaries very much understand that your organization's data is the most valuable asset you have. And we've seen bad guys move beyond ransomware encryption to, double and triple extortion techniques. A great example of this is Clop ransomware that targeted a system last summer called MoveIt. This is an internet accessible file sharing application that they found a vulnerability in. And they could have just leveraged this in order to pivot internal to an environment and start deploying ransomware. But Fin11, the adversary group behind Clop, and they are a ransomware group historically, they didn't do that. Instead, they just stole the data, and they made so much money off of just the data theft and the extortion, that they actually became, for the couple months that this vulnerability was widespread, they became the most successful ransomware operator, extortion operator, just through the data theft. Over $100 million of ransomware payments were tracked in just that 2-month period. So attackers very well understand that going after your data is going to be very financially rewarding. And how are they doing it? It can be through vulnerabilities like the MoveIt vulnerability exploit, but often it's just compromising legit credentials. Over 80% of cyber attacks use identity-based techniques. So now we have attackers focusing on doing something they do very well, gaining access through compromised credentials and logging in instead of breaking in. And when they do that, they're bypassing all of your layers of defense in depth to access your data. All those systems heavily focus on securing your infrastructure. And when that what happens when they bypass those systems through legit login credentials? What happens to your data? We see those capabilities getting bypassed day in and day out, right? And after adversaries bypass that infrastructure security, they virtually have free access to data, the stuff that hurts us the most, the stuff that we're truly trying to protect. So from an industry perspective, we're falling short here, right? Defense in depth is not going deep enough. We need to start thinking about data security from a data perspective. We need to start with data, understanding that data, because, right, we can't defend it if we don't understand it. So how do we secure the data if attackers are logging in and not necessarily breaking in? As I mentioned, virtually any cyber attack today involves those stolen credentials, compromised identities, stolen access tokens, API keys, whatever it might be, right? So either for the initial access or for lateral movement. So how do you actually stop something if you don't have any IOCs you can use, or any file hashes or IPS signatures and so forth? So there's a couple things I think we should do when we think about data security. And of course, Rubrik provides these capabilities, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time here to go in depth in describing Rubrik's specific solutions and how they work. My goal is to make sure that you're aware that these strategies and capabilities exist and that you really should be using them. Rubrik provides them in a very differentiated way, and I'll touch on some of those things as we go along here, but I want to mostly focus on what you can be doing. So first of all, we have to stop thinking about solely about prevention, right? Of course, we want to prevent everything we can, but when we think about data security, it's all about managing risk and working towards cyber resilience, because threats are going to get through your infrastructure security. At Rubrik, we think about what we can do before, during, and after an attack in order to maintain resiliency that'll help us the most when it comes to our data. So before an attack, there are things you can do to reduce your overall level of data exposure. That includes things like right-sizing who has access to data. So implementing least privileged access, removing redundant, obsolete, or trivial data. And of course, ensuring that you're backing up everything that matters into an immutable backup. The less you have exposed, the less damaging if you're breached. During an attack, it's all about being able to detect threats in your data that may have gotten past your perimeter defenses. If something's gotten in, you may already have damage, but if you can detect them before they've managed to exfiltrate a large volume of data or moved further laterally, you're minimizing that impact. And finally, after an attack, you of course want to be able to recover as quickly and as safely as possible. So if you can do these three things well, you can lower your overall risk and increase cyber resilience. So this is going deeper into our defense in depth, focusing on the data itself instead of the infrastructure. So let's drill into each of these things a bit. Let's start with before an attack. I mentioned earlier, securing data is about managing risk, and risk starts with that understanding of your risk. So you have to do some really good discovery to understand what data you're responsible for, because every asset of data that's in your environment, you're responsible for. And then you've got to get rid of all the stuff that doesn't serve the business purpose. So that's the first step, right? The second step is understanding what you still use in your business process. If you have regulated data assets on a production environment that are like 3, 4, 5 years old, do you need them on live systems? If the answer is no, archive it. Remove it from live systems because it still introduces risk. It gets out, you face regulatory fines. And that's what makes you pay the ransom, right? So third step, make sure the right people have access to the data and not everybody. And I know at first this may sound like, man, now you're talking about zero trust for data. I firmly believe that we'll never reach that nirvana state. Let's start simpler, where it's not an all or nothing kind of thing. There are simpler steps to use as a starting point. For example, if you're in the United States, in California, employee records fall under CCPA. If you find yourself in a situation where the PII of your employees is accessible to everybody in the company, well, that's a lot of risk. But how many people work in HR? Maybe 3% of your employees? So let's just say that you only reduce access to people in HR. That reduced the risk from a CCPM or CCPA perspective to those PII records by 97%. That's pretty significant. And it's pretty easy to do. It's a starting point. And of course, you always want to make sure you have an immutable backup for the data that truly matters. About 96% of ransomware attacks today are, we're seeing that attackers are going after the backups. They know this is your ultimate life insurance, and they're specifically targeting it, so you'll be forced to pay their ransom. So Rubrik's data discovery and classification capabilities can help you accomplish all these things. They can help you reduce your sensitive data exposure and manage exfiltration risk by discovering what types of sensitive data you have and where it lives. We also have the ability to understand who has access to this data, so you can more easily implement least privilege access. And we're providing this capability throughout or through our enterprise backup solution, which means we're doing this without introducing additional scanners on your network in a production environment. We're scanning backup snapshots, which also means we're able to track all of your sensitive data and access to that sensitive data over time. So let's move on to during an attack. What happens if what I spoke about earlier comes true? Your infrastructure defenses have been bypassed, and now you have malicious files in your network, poised to attack your data. At that point, you've already been compromised, right? Defense in depth in this case means always scanning for threats to your data. Ransomware or other attacks might be lying dormant, conducting reconnaissance, moving laterally, or even start to begin encrypting data. Having a last line of defense to scan for those activities is critical. Again, with the focus on your data. Of course, we want to scan for IOCs, but and we can do that. Rubrik can help you do that. But there are also indicators in your data itself. Is your sensitive data being encrypted or duplicated? Is that data being downloaded? Is access to sensitive data expanding in an abnormal way? And we want to focus on that data that truly matters, that sensitive or regulated data that's going to cripple your business, threaten your customers, or result in significant regulatory fines. Constantly monitoring for those things over time is going to help tip you off as to whether an attack is happening, so you can respond faster to contain the threat and minimize any potential damage. Rubrik also provides anomaly detection, in addition to the threat monitoring and threat hunting capabilities. And those things help you accomplish all of these things quickly and without putting additional load on your production environment. So threat monitoring is our proactive, always-on capability that scans your backups for threats. It utilizes threat intelligence from Rubrik Zero Labs, Google Mandiant, and other third-party sources to automatically scan your backups for the latest IOCs. Think of it as constant vigilance. You can set it and forget it. Threat hunting is our surgical tool, so you can use it to scan for specific IOCs. It's the fastest in the business. We have a proprietary architecture that allows us to scan thousands of backup images in seconds to minutes. So imagine your industry has been recently victimized by a specific threat, and the board calls wanting to know if you've been impacted. Threat hunting gives you the power to search hashes or Yara rules so you can determine if you're infected very, very quickly. And so, of course, after an attack, we want to be able to cover or to recover as quickly and safely as possible without reinfecting the environment. When it comes to recovering from a cyber attack, every second counts. So the faster you can recover, the less your business is impacted. And the good news is we generally know the things we need to accomplish to be able to recover. We need to understand what data was compromised. We need to know when that data was compromised so we understand what a safe recovery point is. And Rubrik's tools allow you to quickly identify these things and identify and quarantine any malicious files so we can prevent reinfection when we restore. And of course, there's the orchestration of actually restoring clean data and systems. So Rubrik's data remediation capabilities allow you to surgically and rapidly recover your apps, your files, objects, while avoiding that malware reinfection. So you can recover safely at any scale or granularity. So we enable you to quarantine that infected data, restore impacted applications, files, or objects. And of course, we can orchestrate the recovery of those applications. Rubrik provides all of these capabilities as part of our Rubrik Security Cloud. So how do we do it differently? Rubrik first made a name for itself, revolutionizing the enterprise data protection space. And we did a lot there, and we continue to do a lot to revolutionize that space. One of the ways we did that was by bringing data and metadata together. What I mean by that is when we take a backup snapshot, we're actually scanning the data we're backing up, so we learn a whole lot of interesting things about it. In other words, we have a whole lot of context about the data that we're protecting. And then our customers started coming to us and saying, hey, we love your backup and data protection, but the whole reason we back up our data is to be able to recover that data if something happens to it. And of course, one of the primary threats in today's world is cyber attacks. So we quickly realized that there's a whole lot of value to that data context that can help our customers before, during, and after a cyber attack. So what is that context? We're able to tell you where your data is stored. May sound simple, right? But in today's world, where data is stored on-prem in multiple cloud environments and SaaS applications, and it's growing to a point where a typical organization is going to add 150 million sensitive data records in the next 5 years. All of that's really hard to track. What type of data is it? What's in it? Is it sensitive data? Regulated data? How's that data changing over time? Who has access to it, and how's that access changing over time? Right? This is all tremendously powerful context. And before an attack, you can use it to audit your sensitive data. You can use it to minimize data exposure and incorporate least privileged access to reduce your risk. You can monitor your data for threats. During an attack, we can detect harmful changes like encryption and escalating access privileges faster. So organizations can limit the blast radius or the impact of an attack. And then after an attack, this data context can help assess and report on the blast radius, identify a safe restore point, and help customers recover faster and safer. So these capabilities, they're critical to any modern defense in-depth strategy. We know with the growth of enterprise data and how valuable it is, it's the primary target of attackers. We know attacks are going to get through. Defense in depth should be not only about preventing as many threats as possible, it should go deeper to ensure that you're as resilient as possible in the face of successful attacks on your data. So we need to ensure defense in depth is applied with a focus on that data security. So Rubrik offers a much easier, much more efficient approach. Use what you already have in your enterprise backups through our native tools in the Rubrik Security Cloud, single platform, without the need to deploy and manage agents in a production environment, right? So Rubrik is really there for the entire data lifecycle, from the time data is stored and backed up to the time it could be potentially breached. Rubrik's the only platform that offers cyber recovery and cyber posture for enabling that cyber resilience under one umbrella without the need for third parties. All right, that's all my time for today. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and you can learn much more at rubrik.com. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thank you, Zoltan. I always enjoy having Rubrik in the house, so that was really great overview. We are at time, so Zoltan, we're not going to be having a live Q&A session with you, but all of you that asked some questions out there from the audience, don't worry, Rubrik can follow up and make sure they get you any information that you were looking for about their tech, their solution. And there is a poll up there that's asking also what additional information that you might like about Rubrik's solution. So if you're looking for data sheets, white papers, case studies, pricing, demos, anything there, think of this as your wish list. You'll get exactly what you're looking for in a timely fashion after today's EcoCast. And in terms of additional follow-ups, you can also hop over to the handouts section, which we mentioned at the beginning. But in there, you've also got a link to Rubrik Zero Labs, so you can learn how to measure your data security risk. It's a really beautifully designed website, and you've also got some links there to specific data risks if you want to explore further topics more specifically, different types of risks. So that's all there, one click away. So definitely go check that out. And with that, why don't we keep things moving along? I'm going to quickly leave this, or I'm going to shortly take this poll down. So get your answers in, maybe just 10 seconds left here. And then we're going to be having our next team, CyberArk, join us here as well. All right, counting down, switching over. Alrighty, excellent. So next up on the docket, as I mentioned, we've got CyberArk in the house. Franco, who's the Director of Product Marketing, is joining me here. And I will be posing some of your questions to Franco after his presentation. So make sure those questions keep flowing in. Little reminder, there is a $50 Best Question gift card up for grabs from Amazon for each session today. So yes, that is 4 $50 Amazon gift cards, in addition to the 3 that we've got coming down the pipeline, first one of which I'll be giving away after this too. So anyway, just encouraging you to put in quality, inquisitive questions. Is that that's a bad term. Quality questions that are insightful. How's that sound? So keep those coming in for Franco. Franco, I'm going to stop babbling and let you take things away. So welcome to the stage.
Thank you very much. And what a great session so far. And I'm excited to kind of bring to you a new topic. Talk about more about CyberArk. And the topic we have at hand, I'm super excited about it because this is a question I'm hearing constantly from our customer partners. It's not just about finding the attack surface. It's about how can I reduce it? What am I supposed to do with it? How can I minimize it? Minimize the risk eventually. Just to reiterate, put those questions in the chat, $50, throw those curveballs at me. I'm dying to kind of get your take on what I have to share with you today. So first, how the session is gonna be like? We're gonna talk a little bit about the everywhere enterprise attack surface. Okay, I'm gonna state some facts here that I'm sure some of you may know, but I wanna make sure we're level setting. When I say attack surface, what do we mean? And then in context of that, we're gonna jump a little bit to the identity-based threats, a little bit of history, but what are we seeing from the front lines right now from a CyberArk perspective? And then I'm going to take you towards kind of what are the 5 ways that I see you can take action today to minimize your attack surface. And then again, Q&A and some other learning opportunities I want to make sure I'm sharing with you for a follow-up. So first, the attack surface. Let's just do a dictionary definition. Refer to the total set of possible points where an unauthorized user could attempt to enter, interact with, or extract data from an organization's network or system. Pretty straightforward. Basically, the way I look at it is all the ways attackers have to gain access to an environment. Let's put it in a simple way. Now, as I look at the attack surface, let's look at a couple of things that we used to define as attack surface, but we all know the attack surface is growing with the evolution of cloud, with agentic AI now exploiting everywhere. But let's not forget the traditional way of looking at the attack surface. Whether it's a development infrastructure, remote access services, which I know is a main concern, especially when you get third-party access, file sharing systems, networking, security systems, web framework, IT infra, you name it. Now, if I'll try to kind of put this in a bigger bucket, we're looking at applications, web applications, native applications, legacy applications, which are a main kind of problem today, as we know. Networks, whether it's on premises, but how can I look at those diverse and remote workforce that I have? Cloud infrastructure is without a doubt a key problem that we need to kind of have visibility to, as well as our information and our devices. And last but not least is what we look at as our users, identities. And let's just look at when I say users, what do I mean? If you look at the top, the way I look at users is a spectrum of identities from third parties, employees, admin, IT, DevOps. The workforce as we know it is different, but let's not also forget the proliferation of machine identities, which is now booming. From a CyberArk, we've done a research recently. We have a 50-to-1 ratio of machine identities to human identities. So imagine kind of the challenges we have on that front when we think of the attack surface. But I'll also show you a little bit of pros and cons between how we can secure the workforce users versus the machine identities. Let's look at the timeline for a second to the threat landscape and what we're seeing right now, as well as recently reported security breaches. If you look all the way to the left, back, password were and still a main problem and concern for today for organizations. Password we're on a journey to eliminate, but we all know this is not something that's going to happen tomorrow for multiple reasons. I'll talk more about it in a second. Phishing and social engineering. One of the things that I personally thought a decade ago, phishing will go away soon. It will become irrelevant. Is definitely not going anywhere. And still today, one of the major concerns to trick users to provide their credentials. And for organizations that doesn't employ the right controls in place, they literally have an easy way into their organizations. Looking forward, the 2010s till today is around advanced persistent threats, but the exploitation of privileged accounts. One of the things that we are looking right now from CyberArk perspective and as CyberArk Labs research is that we believe that every workforce user can be at the point in time based on the access they are provisioned with, the application, the access, the action they take pre or post authentication can be considered as a high risk. Today, myself logging into a specific application to do my work, probably not as high risk, but I may have access to our company Twitter handle. And with that, even though it's just a social network, I can take a public company to its knees by running a crypto mining campaign if compromised. So this shift on the spectrum of risk is something that we need to take into account, especially when the attackers are looking for those privileged accounts and to compromise that. Continue on that kind of timeline. We see identity theft and fraud still out there. An evolution of insider threat. How can I watch everything that my workforce users are doing? How can I identify those anomalies? How can I identify those changing behavior? Today, this is still a major concern for security teams when we think about how do we apply workforce identity security. Continuing about API and cloud-based attacks, one of the things that the shared responsibility model in the cloud infrastructure gap has is you have a shared responsibility on the network, on the systems, but identity is completely on the customer to manage, add, and control. And we know that 97% of configurations provided to you, identities are overprivileged, and access is a real risk. We see recently an evolution of deepfakes, and something that we've saw more and more kind of second to last there is MFA bypass. We've seen the fact that organizations continue to adopt multi-factor authentication. But as Rubric just mentioned, I'm happy we are following the same line. MFA alone is not enough, and attackers know that. And they are taking account to how can they bypass that standalone control. I'll talk more about how we can shift towards a defense in depth approach where multi-factor authentication alone is not enough. And last but not least, something that we're seeing more recently is ransomware. But ransomware right now, there's been put a lot of controls in it, whether it's protecting the data and data recovery, whether it's further protection on the endpoint. with certain EDR, XDR type of technology. But one of the things that ransomware groups have found out is, why would I go the hard way? Why would I not simply compromise the user credentials and try to bypass easily into the organization, and from there meet my objectives? And this is something we're seeing a lot right now, taking into account from an identity-based ransomware. I'm happy that you're already putting questions in. I'll try to navigate them as I go. I'm a man, I can only do one thing at a time, so I'll try to do that, but thank you. Now, we talked about the attack surface. We talked about the challenges and the threats and the current landscape that are hitting that attack surface. Now, what can you do today? And by the end of kind of this session, what I'm going to make sure is like, how can you decide which step you're going to take next? Let's start looking at that. There's 5 ways when we look at identity security to protect the workforce. Yes, we're actually going to start at the endpoint. The way we look at it is their pre-authentication, at time of authentication, and what's happening once I'm already logged in, I'm past the gate. And oftentimes the approach we take right now in the industry at authentication is already too late. My endpoint may already be compromised. My browser, yes, the browser. How is the browser related to identity security? I'll tell you that in a second. Spoiler alert, the browser is the most used tool in the enterprise. Guess what? To access corporate application and critical data. And it's the only tool in your stack that was not built for the enterprise. Securing access, but how do I make sure I'm also securing that beyond the login? And the last but not least here is, how do I do that across the complete user journey? From the moment the user joins the company, where he's being granted access, all the way to any changes happening until he leaves the company with revoked access based on the action they perform. So Jeff here asked a question about what sets us apart from our competitors. Where CyberArk challenged the current status quo is that we believe that workforce identity security needs to be able to protect each one of those standpoints, and not where the traditional access management today lives with only securing access with your multi-factor authentication. Alone is not enough. So that's kind of tackling that question. But thank you, Jeff. Great question. Let's continue. Let's talk about the first one, securing the endpoint. What do I mean by that? Today, for that extended workforce that I mentioned, whether it's your customers, third parties, external access that you need to provide because that's what the business demands, employees, admins, IT, DevOps, you name it, developer. But if you look at the endpoint for a second, they use 2 types of machines. Let's try to simplify that. One of them is that corporate owned managed, but you also need to deal with organizations that support unmanaged personal devices, which obviously in that scenario, you have way less control. And oftentimes when I talk to organizations, they're completely blind to access requests because of that limitations. So how can you start securing identities at the endpoint, which is the first mile of access? From the moment I logged in to every action I take on that endpoint when that endpoint session is open. The key points that I mentioned there is, how can I remove local admin rights directly on the endpoint? This is a major concern today when you get overprivileged on the endpoint, able to do way more than what you needed to do. How can I enforce that list privileged on the endpoint? How can I defend against ransomware? Now, this sounds a lot like, wait, are you doing EDR or XDR? No. But where we complement those technologies is where they cannot have visibility into. They cannot understand what the identity can do. They don't understand privileges. They cannot limit local admin privileges. And basically stop credential theft. That is securing the endpoint. Let's continue to the next one. Securing the browser. One of the things that we've seen recently, especially with a security breach that was reported to a large identity provider recently, where what happened there is one of the authentication mechanism of the browser, which is known as a session cookie, a session token, was compromised. In that case, without needing any controls, leave alone, multi-factor authentication and likes, the attacker now owning that session token can completely bypass all controls remotely on his own machine and access an environment, and from there laterally move or kind of meet their objectives. So where the browser comes in is to provide three things: security, productivity, and privacy, because, like I mentioned, this is the most used tool in the enterprise. We have to make sure that while we're adding security controls, we're not damaging any user experience we currently have. Now, how does the browser helps? It is able to secure against both pre and post-authentication attacks. The post-authentication attacks is what I just mentioned around stealing that cookie. The way that CyberArk does it is that no cookies are saved on file for the attacker to be able to easily compromise. You cannot grab that with the developer tools because the browser itself is hardened. It is not used for Google in case of Chrome, or Edge in the case of Microsoft, or any other browser, Safari, and it likes to serve the owner of that with basically taking all data to their environment, whether encrypted or not, but actually keeping your enterprise data within your control. Second thing is making it easy for users to access resources and applications. That's the CyberArk secure browser in this case, but it can be any browser. I'm going to make sure you're going to think about it holistically. Is Chromium based. It is the same look and feel of the same browser you have today, but one that was built with identity security in mind to enable that end-to-end access from the endpoint to the browser to every application and resource without keep on prompting for that password, multi-factor authentication, and likes, while keeping the user privacy and making sure that you are staying compliant. So third thing here that I talked about, actually second, sorry, my bad, is we talked about protecting the endpoint. Second is, because that's the first mile. Second is we talked about the browser, the immediate tool that I am personally opening in order to complete my line of work. Tell me in the audience here if you can do the same. We cannot leave. I cannot do anything without the browser. And third, that takes me to where usually when we talk about identity and access management or securing access, that's what we usually think. Let's apply multi-factor authentication and be gone. Now, that was right, maybe, a decade ago. But as you've seen in the threat landscape, that is no longer the case. Attackers are bypassing multi-factor authentication in multiple ways. Attackers are compromising the endpoint access without even authentication taking place. It's everything happening pre-authentication when the user accesses a thick application on the endpoint. Or what if you're now logging into a non-federated application because of SSO tags or because you have a legacy application that doesn't support the right standards? So the approach we're taking right now, and please tell me in the audience if this resonates with you, if you're in this journey, to take access to where it needs to be, to provide a true passwordless experience, as I mentioned, from the first mile on the endpoint when I'm logging into my system through the browser without the need to re-authenticate it because I'm already federated access on the endpoint, all the way to an application without needing further access and easily to those applications provisioned to me. How can I perform that continuous authentication if needed? So in case now, as I'm part of this passwordless journey end to end, and all of a sudden I see an elevation of risk because of user behavior or any indicator of compromise that I was able to identify, I can now take elevated action and stop that session. With securing access, one of the key things we are seeing right now as high demand is how can I apply those passkeys and phishing resistant authentication methods? And last but not least, when I think about access and going back to that password-based technique that attackers have been leveraging for the past 20-something years, is a workforce password manager. One of the things that we're seeing right now is while we focus on MFA, we still have a lot of gaps with non-federated application, non-SSO applications. And that is something that is a key concern because when you're using a consumer grade password manager, you're basically exfiltrating your data outside of the enterprise control. You're mixing between personal information and enterprise information. So trying to sum up the secure access layer here in this defense in depth from the endpoint to the browser to the access, it's about looking at things holistically, how we protect access to every application on the host itself, legacy or SaaS apps, to those federated and non-federated applications with phishing resistance, passkey, and passwordless experience. Moving to the next one. What do I mean with secure beyond the login? If you look at the spectrum of threats, going back to that again, we talked about threats that happening pre-authentication, threats that happening at time of authentication. We took MFA bypass as an example, but we also have what's happening once I'm already past the gate. In today's world, most times we're just saying you're good to go, good luck. But obviously that's not enough for multiple reasons. Shared accounts. How do I know in the case of that example I provided when a session token was provided and authentication was bypassed? How can I continue to control what the user can do, can see beyond the login? How can I gain device context, whether this device is trusted, and if not, take further controls for that? In this case, if the case of the session token stealing or session abuse, I can now see I'm using on a different device. In this case, the attacker wants. I can also apply session monitoring and recording for those high critical applications and high risk users that I talked about a second ago. And in case I see an elevation of risk, a change in behavior, a user is doing something he or she should not, I can go ahead and terminate, elevate the policy, and re-prompt for authentication as needed to really double down on continuous authentication once you're already past that gate. That was the 4 control. Again, recap: endpoint, browser, securing access, but also looking at controlling beyond the login. Jumping to the next one. Secure the complete user journey, which applies to everything that I've said so far. How can I have this defense in depth approach from the endpoint to the browser across access, protecting the password and beyond the login across the complete user journey? When we provision control or when we revoke access, in a join, remove, a leaver types of scenario, when you have a single source of truth, which is managed elsewhere through HR-driven identity with your HR kind of directory. And how can you automate that process in a complete no-code workflow? Now, I want to summarize that and also look at the questions here. Hopefully I can tackle one or two there. And I want you to kind of hear from you, what would you want to start doing today? Securing on the endpoint, the first mile. How can I initiate my passwordless experience on the endpoint? How can I make sure that accessing thick and native applications are done in a least privileged manner? Shifting to securing the browser. How can I protect the most used application in the enterprise, the one used to access critical SaaS applications, critical infrastructure, different resources, and protect against these pre and post authentication threats? How can I secure access and protect the password? And how do I go beyond the traditional approach? Challenge your own status quo of how we looked at access management that worked for a decade ago, but no longer holds water in reality today against the attacker tactics and techniques, and securing beyond the login, and doing so across the complete user journey. I'm going to look at one of the questions here. What is the best way to secure the user and app password, from Katie? Great question. Unfortunately, there is no single answer. One of the ways that the way we look at passwords is we need to understand where those are used. What are the use cases? Oftentimes, our journey is to eliminate password and to shift to a passwordless experience when you're using passkeys, but we understand that password cannot be completely eliminated. And this is where we need to provide some kind of a password manager. For example, one of the customers that I've talked to recently, they're a customer of GitHub. And GitHub charged for that enterprise license 600% more to be able to embed SSO and federate access to GitHub. That results in developer having username password access to GitHub. That's a problem because they use any password manager, which is out of your control, or they don't use anything and are very susceptible to phishing attacks targeting those credentials to GitHub. You're probably kind of where you keep your code repository. So there's no real single answer, but that's kind of how I look at it. Great question, Kathy. That's definitely worth $50. Now, I want to share with you kind of a little bit, if you want to scan this QR code to learn more about what's coming next. But with that, let's shift to additional Q&A if you have. I'm looking at the chat right now to see if I have some more.
Yeah. Do you mind if I pick one out for you?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So one person was asking, out of all these 5 ways that you talked about, is there any one that people should focus on first?
That's a great question. Thank you. Sometimes it's the wounds you have on your back and the problems you face in your past. But I feel that today, if you don't have any of these controls, the biggest bang for your buck is to go down the MFA and single sign-on kind of path. However, if I probably look left and right, if we're all in the same room, most of you already have that. So the next best thing is to understand where else can that password be compromised. And that would be a password manager, because we see compromised credentials. And by the way, if you read the Verizon Data Breach Report for the past decade, it was always the user and it is always the password that's kind of leading to that initial exploitation. So for me, it's that password manager and securing beyond the login, because I want to make sure that once I put my control in place, I want to know everything they're doing beyond that. And if something happens, I want to be there to kill the session and take extra controls. But that's kind of would be my approach. Good question.
Nice. And I have one that's kind of, similar to this or related. Someone's asking, should we apply all of these controls against every workforce user? Is it overkill, or how would you approach that?
Yeah, that's an amazing question as well. If you remember at the beginning, we mentioned that every workforce user is at a risk of becoming high risk at a point in time based on the privilege provided for them, the application and resource they access, and the action they take on that. So once we identify our identities, external access, employees, you name it, we can apply the right controls based on the level of risk. That means that for traditional workforce, again, me, doing multi-factor authentication and having endpoint presence to be able to operate and make sure that my device trust is legit, I don't think more controllers are needed. But me, as a privileged user, or even let's take a better example, an external access to my organizations when I don't have any endpoint controls, it is a personally owned device. I want to make sure, how can I make a consistent way of them accessing my environment the same way as I apply for my employees? And this is where adding that browser as an additional controls, as well as adding securing the web session beyond the login, is where I would put additional controls in place, because I consider that as a high risk access. Someone from a third party team has a leg into my organizations, and I want to make sure I'm controlling and monitoring that. These are two examples that I have.
Nice. Awesome. I think we are pushing up against time. I'd love to keep picking your brain here, but why don't we just wrap with a open question of, if people are curious, they want to learn more, or if there's something you think they should be particularly aware of going forward after today's EcoCast, where would you point them? Where should they go? What should they do?
Great point. The next step I would advise right now is, go to cyberark.com. We have plenty of webinars. We actually have a similar approach to what I shared with you today on the workforce identity security pages. There's a lot of collateral that you can learn from there. And also, feel free to reach out to me, maor.franco@cyberark.com. Happy to help with any questions. And thank you for kind of being with me today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's been great to have you here, and hope to have you back again soon.
Thank you.
All righty. Take good care. If anyone did miss that QR and you want to check it out, I'm going to just throw that up again. So feel free to give that a little scan. A couple additional options for follow-up, other than what Franco mentioned, is in the handouts tab. You have got a link there. This is to the CyberArk white paper, so you can check that out. This is Reimagine Workforce Security for End-to-End Identity Protection with CyberArk. So definitely worth grabbing as well. And I'm going to pull that QR down and quickly throw up a poll. And again, this is kind of your wish list, your easy button. So if you want specific follow-ups, this is an easy way to indicate that. So the poll is just asking what additional information you would like about CyberArk's solution. So again, you want data sheets, white papers, case studies, pricing, a demo, all that good stuff. Just throw your answer in there if you're looking for some specific follow-ups, and we'll make sure that gets to you as well. If you did ask a question and we didn't have time for it today, my apologies. We could only do so much with the time we have, but CyberArk also has all those questions, and they can follow up and make sure if you had some specific inquiry that you get the information you're seeking there as well. And before our next team comes on out here to chat and discuss further on this topic, it is prize time. So we mentioned the $50 best question gift cards for each session. Those will be picked after the webinar, and we'll be reaching out. But we're giving away the first of 3 $300 Amazon gift cards here right now. And that first one is going out to Ryan Thomason from Oklahoma. So Ryan, huge congrats. And as always, what we're going to do is reach out after the webinar, let you know how you can get that claimed, and it'll be sent over to you digitally. So super exciting. And with that, well, let's keep things on the move, keep the show on the road. Next up, we have got the team from Druva in the house. We have Neil Ashworth here, Senior Solutions Architect of Security SME. And yeah, I'm excited. Neil, I've had you on before, been able to hear you speak in the past, but excited to have you speaking on this today. So I'm kicking it over to you.
Hello and welcome to this Druva presentation on Defense in Depth. Do it yourself squared versus software as a service. I'm Neil Ashworth. I'm a solutions architect for security here at Druva, and over the next 20 minutes or so, I'll explore what Defense in Depth means to us. Given that it's a partially subjective topic, it varies depending on an organization's unique needs, such as risk profile, available resources, and operating model. This gives a lot of freedom of discussion within the boundaries of a fairly well understood concept. So what is Defense in Depth? Well, as the name itself suggests, you don't have to be a security expert to understand that Defense in Depth is the process of layering security tools and methods so that an organization isn't reliant on one single safeguard to secure their data. Now, since Defense in Depth is subjective, we have various frameworks to help guide organizations of all sizes towards a layered strategy of cyber defense. Like the NIST Special Publication 800-207 for Zero Trust Architecture. This understands that the boundary of perimeter defenses is now much more difficult to define, and as such attempts to remove trust zones from the environment, moving that challenge response mechanism as close to the resource being accessed as possible. So that uses concepts of least privilege and need to know, along with strict access control. It's an architecture of maximum segmentation, and even provides frameworks for guidance on contextual connections between processes, both human and machine. The NIST Cybersecurity Framework uses 6 pillars to define key areas of focus for cyber resiliency: govern, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Each of them explores in much greater detail how an organization would properly account for and put into place cyber controls for all organizational IT key personnel and processes, with the goal of making an organization more resilient in the face of cyber threats. The ISO 27000 series focuses more on best practice recommendations for information security management, emphasizing layers in access control, physical security, and incident management. There are various other frameworks available that many organizations may explore to secure their systems, such as the NIS2 directive in the European Union, and that's for network and information systems. And the Centre for Internet Security has its own philosophical approach with its CIS controls, and that emphasizes multiple secure measures that overlap to create resilience. The point being is that there are many fairly broad in scope frameworks for defense in depth strategies, and many companies will likely use a myriad of different frameworks in order to employ cybersecurity in their environment. Although each framework has its own nuance, benefits, and specific focus, they're all designed to be applicable across a large swathe of industries and companies of all sizes. They're designed to raise the floor of security, and as such you'll find that they share many components and best practices. I wanted to discuss some of the commonalities across Defense in Depth, so I asked ChatGPT to aggregate data from existing information on the matter and give me a list of appropriate category headers used for cyber defense in depth. It outlined the following of perimeter security, edge technologies such as next-gen firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and threat intelligence platforms. It used the category of network security to encompass any types of micro or macro segmentation, such as VPCs or VLAN, or security groups, access control lists, etc. Endpoint security would cover technologies like antivirus, endpoint detection and response, XDR, patch management, vulnerability scanning. Application security involves the processes of security development lifecycle, CI/CD pipeline, API security, and the use of web application firewalls. data security through the use of extensive encryption in transit and at rest, making sure that you take appropriate numbers of backups, tools like data loss prevention and data anomaly detection. Identity and access management is facilitated through the deployment of multi-factor authentication tools, single sign-on, role-based or attribute-based access control to establish least privilege access. Physical security, as you imagine, deals with the facility access and could even include HVAC controls, surveillance systems and security personnel. An incident response, recovery and monitoring is the establishment of a set of procedures and guidelines to help in the responsive actions of a cyber incident. It's also the establishment of a log aggregation and alert monitoring tool like a SIM, maybe even integration with orchestration, automation and response tools. Using SOC teams to analyze the alerts generated for investigation. So, if we were to go back in time, even as short as 10 years ago, the practice of solutioning for data backup, data resiliency and business continuity and disaster recovery, or BCDR, was very cumbersome. It involved an organisation being much more hands-on, and security teams would need to effectively double their efforts to ensure data confidentiality, integrity and availability, once for their primary environment and then again for their backup environment. They had to architect an appropriate solution and procure the infrastructure, but also project consumption 5 years out so they can right-size capacity, which invariably led to higher upfront costs and much lower early utilization. Then they'd have to apply all of the security hardening best practices to those systems to mitigate the blow of the operating system attack surface, or while also deploying their security safeguards, part of their own organisation. I read recently that we're up to over 70 tools in enterprise organisations. Then the regular processes of keeping up with all of the upgrading and patching that entire stack. Not to mention trying to mitigate issues across different vendors, different technologies, which invariably leads to troubleshooting any issues with that backup environment. And all of this is almost antithetical to the goals of shifting our infrastructure to the cloud. Looking at these 8 defense in-depth categories, we instinctively associate them with tasks necessary to secure our primary environment, our primary data center. And we use models and frameworks to build resiliency against cyber threats and consider data backup as just another component to building resilient infrastructure. But enterprise backup is so much more than just copying data using the 3-2-1 rule. 3 copies of data on 2 different types of media and 1 copy off-site. Data protection solutions, especially those intended for the enterprise, need to be supported by servers and proxies, agents and networks and management interfaces. And that's all before we even begin to explore more sophisticated capabilities, such as data monitoring and alerting, data loss prevention, sensitive data search and governance, ransomware detection. How do we respond and recover, and integrations with other third-party tools. Backup technologies have their own extensive operating infrastructure. The last slide highlighted for us the complexity of building those solutions ourselves, effectively akin to building a replica data center, securing it, and then continuously maintaining that security. So if your IT and security teams are required for any of the processes of hardware purchase, installation, configuration, monitoring, or patch management of the solution that goes into supporting this enterprise backup, then you're doubling your labor. It's effectively do-it-yourself squared. So to begin the analysis of how SaaS solutions provide defense in depth, I'll begin by reviewing how we back up your data into Druva. Earlier, when I mentioned defense in depth models, I referenced the NIST special publication for Zero Trust architecture. In all honesty, it was influenced by my own biases on what good cyber resilient architecture looks like. But also, coincidentally, it's how we approach securing the Druva data security cloud. First, with no on-prem infrastructure, you need only an agent, proxy, or secure API connection to begin securely moving your data into the Druva cloud. And with our global source deduplication engine, we're able to gain bandwidth efficiencies and savings across the storage tiers, resulting in a solution of high efficiency. Man-in-the-middle attacks are effectively mitigated through our use of encrypted channels, and source-side deduplication means that Druva's only ever sending fragments of data rather than full snapshots. The proxy or the agent also does the work of splitting the metadata from the data and sending those data shards to their appropriate storage bucket and NoSQL database. In the highly unlikely event of those packets being intercepted, the attacker would gain nothing but random data blocks. Perimeter security is as expected. Since we're using the public internet or direct connect to transfer that customer data into the Druva cloud, we ourselves are using AWS services, and we use AWS Web Application Firewall, Elastic Load Balancing, and content delivery. But most crucially, we force industry standard TLS over port 443. Similarly, physical security in a SaaS platform is provided for by the infrastructure provider, and in this instance, we're using AWS data centers, where security guards, fencing, and intrusion detection technology is used, as well as restricted physical access to only authorized personnel with valid business justifications. There is management of flood and seismic risks using physical barriers and threat detection technology, just to name a few. To protect the services within the cloud, we use multiple VPCs and non-routable subnets, using private link for service-to-service calls, which prevents the possibility of packets being intercepted. Our serverless compute resources are also included into their appropriate microsegmentation or security group policies, and all human accessible methods such as SSH have been disabled. Using AWS organizations also gives us the ability to securely structure organizational units. So creating or suspending new Druva accounts is possible within minutes, and we can allocate resources, group accounts, or organize workflows, and apply policies to accounts for governance and security compliance. And most importantly, audit log capture and retention, with CloudTrail logstream for all accounts. By using OUs, we have the ability to record all user activities across all accounts and regions automatically. The logs are then stored securely and indefinitely in a separate, highly restricted AWS account in a security-hardened and tamper-proof S3 bucket. On top of that, we pushed the trail logs to our internal SIM tool to alert us in almost real time of any unusual activities before taking action to remediate any incidents. Our alerts were carefully designed to reduce noise and only deliver critical, actionable events so we can promptly take action. At Druva, we extensively use containerization technology for deploying applications in our cloud. Containers are a lightweight and portable way to package and deploy software, which makes them a perfect fit for our SaaS-based application. Containers also provide a high level of isolation between different applications, which is critical for our multi-tenant apps. Being one of the largest consumers of AWS data services in the world, we're very vigilant about and closely monitor our InfoSec score. So, our InfoSec score takes into account a variety of different factors, such as known vulnerabilities in the software packages included in the image, the age of the image, and the overall size of the image. So with the InfoSec score as one metric to improve, the goal was pretty clear. We want all of our container images to have zero vulnerabilities, be regularly replaced with clean new images, and of a minimal possible size to reduce the vulnerability footprint. Druva mostly contains Docker images hosting microservices written in Go and Python languages. Go code is compiled into machine code, which is then packaged into a container. The benefit of Go's static linking and the ability to build a single binary executable make it easy to create small, self-contained container images. This is because there's no need to include the runtime environment in the container image, as the binary executable contains all of the necessary dependencies. Python, on the other hand, is an interpreted language, which means that it needs to have the Python interpreter and any necessary dependencies along with the application code included in the container image in order for it to run the code. This increases the size of the container image compared to a compiled language like Go, which only needs to include the binary executable. The average size of a Go-based Docker container is around 500 megabytes, while the Python-based Docker container were around 1.6 gigabytes. The generated software bill of materials, or SBOM, of the Go-based Docker image contained around 400 packages, and the Python-based image container contained at least over 500 packages. Most of the packages listed on the SBOM are introduced from the base OS layer of the container. We employed Docker Slim, which is a specifically built command of the tool, and executed it on the existing Go-based images. The same approach failed to work on the Python-based containers initially, as Python containers contained the code as well as the runtime for execution. So first we had to run PyInstaller utility to package our Python application along with its dependencies, and this enabled us to run the package application without installing the Python runtime or any modules inside the container. We could now pass the packaged Python container through that same Docker Slim build command to create a slimmed package version of the images. What resulted from this was the Go image became 11 times smaller, reducing packages from around 400 to approximately 50. Similarly, the Python image was reduced in size by over 8 times, reducing the package from around 500 to less than 100 packages. The benefits of vastly reducing the attack surface are plain to see. We went from identifying over 125 critical vulnerabilities and exposures in the package to 0 CVEs after slimming. The slimmed version of the container image also makes the deployment smooth, fast and cost efficient. The slimmed images are light on the disk, therefore reducing AWS ECR costs. And the small size containers are faster to pull, resulting in faster deployment times. We observed up to 90% faster push and pull of slimmed container images as compared to actual images. And we spawn over 6,000 container images in the production environment every couple of weeks. So this is a huge value add to our organization and to our customers. So this slide does look complicated, but if we move from the bottom up, it makes much more sense. So number 1 outlines what we've already discussed, in that secure connections are made between the customer data sources and the Druva Data Security Cloud. And by separating the metadata from the data and performing source-side deduplication, where we're able to capture all of those changed data blocks, we only end up storing fragments of data rather than the whole data set. And we store them encrypted. And at no time does Druva ever have access to the keys to decrypt the data, since they're wrapped in an envelope encryption process using a key encryption key held by the customer. Number 2 highlights the optional use of a Druva Cloud Cache appliance. And this is for customers who are operating with very specific, i.e. sub 5-minute RPO and RTO requirements. Point 3, one tier up from the bottom, highlights that our cloud is regularly measured and validated against industry standards for cloud computing. Point 4 emphasizes the operational and performance benefits of a SaaS architecture for data protection. We're able to do auto-scaling for resources when needed. Ransomware is a Black Friday event. You don't need all of these resources, and then all of a sudden, bam, you do. You need to be able to spin up resources in order to be able to scan lots of your primary data center snapshots in parallel. This also allows us to achieve things like auto-archival, auto-redundancy and resiliency with multi-region storage. And point 5, atop of all of this hardened and secured architecture, we're able to deliver several great benefits to our customers, effectively using backup as a security forensics data lake. The management UI can be configured to support role-based access control to prevent permissions sprawl and using single sign-on and multi-factor authentication to help create a root of trust access. But also, using data analysis, we may also be able to provide early warning of suspicious or anomalous activity, such as data deletions, modification events, or ransomware execution. Tying those insights into the existing SIM workflow helps provide another unique intel feed to early warning systems. And that's all great and valuable information to take away, but from a customer experience, we're also very well aware that data protection solutions are often set it and forget it utilities. Necessary and crucial as part of a robust cybersecurity strategy, but not something that should require a great deal of attention. And to that end, we include for all of our customers the support of a 24/7 by 365 Druva managed data detection and response team. This team monitors cloud telemetry, providing insights on Druva cloud activity, and can start proactively alerting customers experiencing an attack who may not yet be aware of a compromise or suspicious activity, especially not aware of it in their backup environment. This helps accelerate response time to active threats and provides experienced support to help with event analysis, running pre-built response runbooks and helping lock down the backups to safeguard the data, and supporting the ongoing efforts of the organization to re-establish control over their environment and their data. So now when we revisit the basic concepts of defense in depth, after exploring how a SaaS data protection platform would apply a layered cyber resilience strategy, we can appreciate that the complexity and labor that's involved is exponential. And hopefully at this point we agree that a SaaS approach, which is basically taking all of that risk and transferring it, is a much more palatable approach than the alternative do-it-yourself squared. There's so much I wasn't able to cover today given the time, but if you'd like to learn more about Druva, we have some information available in our data security white paper. If you've heard enough and you actually want to see the product in action, we offer a fully self-service product tour where you can see the simplicity of the Druva Data Security Cloud in person. I want to thank you all for your time and attention today. I hope you found this presentation interesting and maybe a little informative. And if you have any questions, hopefully I can answer them during the next few minutes. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Neil. Great job. I'm excited to pick your brain and pose you a few of these questions here from the audience. But I do have that poll up there, so I'm sure you're all starting to get to know the drill, essentially just asking what additional information you would like about the Druva solution. So again, data sheets, white papers, case studies, pricing, demos, you name it. Just plunk in your answer there and let Druva know what you were looking for. And with that, well, Neil, let's cover a few of these questions, shall we?
Sure, let's go ahead.
All right. First one I've got here. Okay, someone's asking, industry analysts consistently cite concerns about ransomware and data security as a top reason for moving to a SaaS-based data protection. Do you have a hardware or software renewal coming up in the next 6 months?
Well, that's not a question for me, surely.
Okay, maybe this is tagged from a previous presenter wrongly in here. Let me see. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. Let's talk about AI. This is always a good one. I've got one. It's just simple.
Sure.
How is Druva using AI in its products?
Oh, yeah. Like many companies right now, we're exploring, we have been using machine learning as a way to more accurately detect anomalies in customers' backed up data and analyzing telemetry data that we capture from the platform that we can then use to help highlight suspicious activity and then alert the customers. But more recently, we've been leveraging the Amazon Bedrock capability to build out Drew Investigate, which would allow for just natural language query to troubleshoot either suspicious or technical issues that end users may be experiencing with the platform, such as why did my last backup fail, as an example. And it would return more accurate, detailed responses, predominantly as a way to help mitigate the skill fade that may occur. You know, if you've not logged into the console for a while, you just want to ask a straightforward question. We're using large language models for that purpose, but also, as I say, machine learning to help get better accuracy and reduce the number of false positive alerts in our detection engine. So a few areas actually quite exciting.
That is great. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see that unfold over the next while here.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got a question here. They're essentially asking if you can kind of shed some light on if and how Druva is protecting against ransomware.
Yeah. Well, protecting, yes. Since we operate in a data protection space, predominantly where we can assist customers that have been impacted by ransomware is in detection, helping kind of highlight any discrepancies in the latest backup, which could be markers of encryption or the presence of indicators of compromise, and we can alert on that. And then in terms of response, being able to almost capture a more a clearer picture of, say, the blast radius. Since if you're using a backup utility for intelligence, what you effectively glean from that is the ability to kind of query data across your entire infrastructure offline. So being able to enhance detection or accelerate detection of ransomware activity, also being able to respond to it by isolating backups so you don't inadvertently restore an infected system and potentially reinfect a production network, and then respond by also cleaning up snapshots. So let's say we have a file server that's been impacted by ransomware. We can look back through various different snapshots taken of that file server and reconstitute a golden snapshot of the last known clean copy of every file within that system, and then scan it for malware, all within the cloud using cloud scale, because ransomware events are a Black Friday event. You don't necessarily need all of these compute resources until you encounter an incident, and then you do. And then you need the ability of cloud scale to scan in parallel all of these various systems that could have been potentially impacted, and then do a certified cyber recovery. So for ransomware, for customers that have experienced ransomware, we help accelerate and simplify the process of detection, response, and recovery.
Okay, excellent. And actually mentioning kind of that scanning and backup, I do have a question here from Mark. This might have to be the last question just due to time, but he's asking, how often does Druva scan data at rest for newly found or released vulnerabilities, and can this frequency be scheduled and configured?
So right now we have a threat hunting capability, which is currently it's a manual process, which is augmented by CISA reports of new indicators of compromise. So the idea being that you could potentially schedule a threat hunt to run across, say, your EC2 infrastructure, your enterprise virtual machines running on VMware. Schedule it to scan snapshots when new IOCs have been released by CISA. That way, you're not, burning compute cycles in the cloud unnecessarily, but you're actually proactively, programmatically, kind of scanning your snapshots for the presence of zero-day IOCs, which then could help you kind of chase down potential endpoints that have been infected, which may have been missed by an endpoint detection suite. So currently it's manually, but you can in the next release, we're looking to be able to schedule that in line with CISA releases of IOCs, and then scan against other threat detection, threat intelligence databases like VirusTotal, things like that.
Incredible. Sounds like you've got a lot going on. I'm excited to keep tabs on all these new things.
Very exciting times.
Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, yeah, my pleasure. Any final words? Any call to action you'd throw out to the audience here before we let you go?
No, but you're able to conduct almost a self-service trial with Druva. So you'll be able to kind of trigger a self-service trial of the platform by visiting druva.com. And we've got events being hosted throughout the year, webinars, etc. So if you keep an eye out, more than welcome to attend.
Awesome. That's perfect. Well, thanks so much. Take good care.
You too.
You're welcome. So actually we do have that self-assessment linked in the handouts tab as well for Druva. So if you guys do want to check that out, you absolutely can. So basically a product tour, and you can experience the platform and get a sense of that. Lots to explore there. So really great. And again, final thank you to Neil. That was excellent. And again, if we didn't get to all your questions today, those will be passed on. So of course, we're always trying to pick the best ones and answer as many as we can. And we'll follow up with any information you're looking for. With that, it is prize time once again. So if you've had your fingers crossed, toes crossed, you're excited, you're hopeful, well, you don't have to wait much longer. Our second $300 Amazon gift card is coming up now. And again, you do need to be live and present here on the webinar to win. But aside from that, let's give this thing away. Next one is going out to Michael Chong from California. Congrats, Michael. We'll reach out after the EcoCast and let you know how you can get that prize. And with that, shockingly, we are on our fourth and final presenter here today. Excited to have Simulate here in the house. We've got Brian Morin, who's the Senior Product Marketing Director. He's going to be presenting to start off, and then Paul Ashwood is going to join for the Q&A. He's the Senior Product Marketing Manager there, and we figured, hey, why not have someone who's working on the product specifically and really can talk to all the technical aspects of it. So again, get your questions in as Simulate talks and presents and shares the knowledge, and we'll go from there. And with that, Brian, well, why don't you take it away and wrap things up in style?
Hey, Mackenzie, thanks for having me today. I really like this topic of defense in depth because it's really timeless. Defense in depth, layers of security, it's something we've been talking about for 20, 30 years now within security. What we haven't necessarily talked about is validating and making sure that those controls you put in place, that defense in depth is working as you expected. So for today's presentation, I'll talk about what your controls aren't telling you. So I'll jump into it with an anecdote. A month or two ago, I'm on LinkedIn and I see this security auditor, risk assessment consultant. He posted an open letter to Palo Alto. And what he identified was, hey, when he goes into a risk assessment, he goes into the security maturity assessment, he'll see a control like Palo Alto, premium network security product, and he has anticipation of, oh, this company takes security seriously. But when they got into the assessment, they realized, well, they have a very expensive, premium product. It's not all those premium features, the advanced security features aren't turned on. And so he highlighted a feature here of, inspecting, malicious content within encrypted traffic. Okay, just highlighting an open letter to Palo Alto and the CEO. I think like every good CEO, he sees that and says, hey, thanks for this criticism, thanks for this observation. This is something we need to work on. And then he does something, he points the finger. He points the finger at the customer and saying, hey, they're not willing to share. So it's really the customer's fault they're not really deploying it correctly. And this is like, of course, I'm having a little fun with Palo Alto, and it could be any security vendor. In fact, there were a lot of likes of this comment, and I would probably say most of my previous employers were probably included in those likes of, hey, we build good stuff. It's the customer's problem that's not deployed correctly. That's what I want to kind of talk about today. So obviously a lighthearted start, but let's talk about the purpose of layers of defenses and defense in depth, but the challenge is we often see a single point of failure. From our view, the heart of every security breach includes a security control that didn't perform as expected. You spent millions of dollars on the controls, the rollout of your security program, yet 58% of those breaches go unidentified by the security teams and tools. We saw a study from Deloitte that basically talked about an average of 20% utilization of their purchased cyber technology. Again, you've made that investment. Let's make the most out of it. And what really leads to a problem, like, hey, as a security team, you have the layers of defense. When there's a new threat, your CEO, CIO, sees the threat and says, hey, security leader, security team, are we protected from that? Surely, of all the money we spent, we should be ready. We should be ready for that. Well, from our customers, our onboarding survey saw that the average customer was spending more than 48 hours validating and testing their controls as, hey, am I covered for that new threat? So the truth of it is that because you've invested in security, you've deployed the security, doesn't really mean your security is under control. And I'll kind of point to three challenges of that. One, it's the security controls come with default modes. And as every security vendor knows, they have to prove fast time to value. To get it deployed, to get it used. So let's not have a cumbersome onboarding process. Well, if you're not spending time to tune and optimize it, you're relying on those defaults. You're really kind of relying on them for the usability, right? That those defaults are designed around usability as opposed to maximizing the effectiveness. Of course, but if you do the amazing good tuning and deployment, of course the threats aren't staying the same, right? Those are evolving, those are innovating, and especially around the areas of control evasion. Right? So keeping up with the threats, that's a challenge. And then, of course, your environments are not static, right? There's going to be new applications, changes to those applications. Hey, a new business process, new business initiative requires you just make an exception. Opens a new door for a threat. Are the controls really in place for that? So these are the challenges of, again, why we need more validation. So I'll go into this idea of, like, what are your controls not telling you? Again, you've made that investment, you've bought premium security, you take security seriously, but let's make sure they're working appropriately. So the first thing that a control is not going to tell you is that they're not following best practices. Hey, you hired that control, you purchased that control to do a job, whether it be stay up with keeping up with ransomware, blocking phishing attempts, old threats. Old threats are a big one, right? It's not that a CVE from a few years ago. It still could be one of the top exploited opportunities out there. And then files from unknown sources. Just this idea of, like, best practices of making sure your controls are deployed and tuned appropriately. There's generally not going to be a report that says, hey, let's these are the things you should be doing. Of course, there's some common control gaps we see across endpoint, network, and web app firewalls. Just a couple examples. Endpoint security has improved. It's night and day from 5 to 8 years ago. Right? The idea of, like, the behavioral analysis has taken us so much further. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing signature-based malware, because that still has a role. And that's still part of our layers of defenses. Making sure that you're providing the protection for known malware, whether for network, for looking at basic things like lateral movement. We know network segmentation is hard. Let's make sure we get that done appropriately. What kind of filtering can we do at the gateway level of just known malicious content? And of course, the WAF, WAF's of a problem is a challenge of itself, right? Keeping up with the application and the protections of what's there. Cross-site scripting remains one of those top issues of, are we really protected against that? Just maintaining with the latest OWASP top 10. Again, those are the control gaps that we see, and that's what you're likely seeing as well. The next thing that a control will never tell you is that, hey, we're not covered, right? Hey, you may have invested in the control, you have deployed in certain areas, but it's not necessarily deployed to all environments. Is it deployed in your cloud? Is it deployed in systems and endpoints? Are there locations, branch offices, remote workers where, again, you've had this purchase, you've rolled it out, but are there other environments where you're not necessarily covering? And of course, my favorite, I'm sure, hopefully it's never happened to you, is when a development and a staging environment goes into production. It was designed to be for fast iteration and innovation, and all of a sudden it's in production and it doesn't necessarily have the controls. The bottom line is that you need to know your attack surface, see what the attacker sees. The next thing that a control won't tell you is what's changed. You have a golden image, but when are you identifying an area where the control is not configured to match that golden image? Another challenge would be when there's changes to that golden image where it's a security team you're not aware of. If security team's not in that change management process or was cut out because there's a rapid business need to be adaptive and roll something out quickly, again, the control configuration is not updated to support that new environment, the new application. A temporary exception to, hey, I got to get this done, becomes something permanent. The policy or rule changes are not communicated, not documented. So managing your drift, what's changed in the environment, making sure the security is maintaining that. Something the control is not going to tell you. And then the control is not going to tell you, I'm going to miss that threat. Hey, there's a new threat out today, right? A CISA alert. Whether that's something that you as a security team are watching and doing your own analysis of, or it's something that the CEOs saw in the headlines and said, hey, are we protected against this? That new emerging threat, how do you validate and test and say, hey, we're protecting against this threat? And especially around things like control evasion, right? Are we able to test and validate the ways of attackers get around that control? And do I have layers of defense behind it in case that one control is evaded? So you don't have that single point of failure. So these are 4 questions that a security control will never tell you. Here at Simulate, our view around security validation is our approach is to empower the security teams to test, optimize, harden those defenses through attack simulation and exposure validation. Okay, so what do we mean by that? This evolution of proactive security, in our view, is that, hey, simulation really fills the gap of answering the questions of am I protected? So our traditional views of proactive security would be, hey, I've got network pen testing, application pen testing. If I'm lucky, I've got an internal red teaming to go test and validate my environment for vulnerabilities, misconfiguration, attack paths, and do some individual testing of controls. Very manual, not continuous, and so it's often limited by scope. Limited view of measuring that defense efficacy. Of course, there's automated ways of doing our assessments. Our proactive security and vulnerability management is essential, right? Let's go identify those vulnerabilities. The misconfigurations in cloud are huge, right? Must have the attack paths of those. What's the theoretical? How do I map something? All value, and technology is available to make that continuous, to make it scalable. Really kind of identifying the exposure, that is exposure discovery. But what those things aren't doing are validating and testing the controls, and that's where exposure validation comes into play. Using technologies like breach and attack simulation, automated red teaming, to make this process continuous. Let's cover every environment with scope in a very cost-effective way, and go deep on evaluating the defense efficacy. Right? That's the role of Simulate exposure validation using technologies like breach and attack simulation. I'll kick off with one example. Right? So if I go deep on one example of an email gateway, right? You're in charge of validating of say it's your proof point, say it's something it's in Microsoft Exchange, whatever your endpoint validation, endpoint security gateway is. Do we know? Can you test and validate? How good is it against known ransomware and those file techniques, the malware? What kind of payloads can be exploited, right? Is there code in an email body? This is the optimization that you need to be doing in your control, and not trusting the control that is doing the job. Let's test and validate. So we look at things like, hey, what are the executable files that we can actually send in an email, right? What kind of Office files are appropriate? Is there email spoofing that can be done here? We'll give it a rating. We'll give you some penetration ratios, so you're able to measure how good is my email security, and then, make some decisions on how do I get better. Do I need a new control and I rip that out, or hopefully just optimizing what you have. Something like email gateway, based off the types of threats, this could be easily done weekly. Let's test and validate what's happening, against, including the latest threats. Again, having a minimum score, trending your behavior, and proving the value of what your email security does. Of course, email security is just one example, right? We want to provide that security validation across your web gateway, your web app firewall, endpoint, cloud security, DLP, SIM observability, right? All these controls can be tested. They should be tested. Let's get facts and data to prove what's my prevention rate, what's my detection rate, what are the gaps, let's map it to MITRE attack, and am I covering full MITRE tactics and techniques? What are those sub-techniques that I need to be covered for? We can do that across these controls and give you a way of measuring, baselining, identifying the gaps, and then taking some action to go validate and optimize those controls. Again, it's not just about finding the problem. It's not just about finding the gap and telling you your control's not configured appropriately. It's about optimization, right? You don't need just another assessment of things to go work on. You need ways of making it better. And so our focus is on optimizing those defenses. We want to give you the precise information you need to improve your prevention and detection. Some things like IOC updates. Hey, we can go automatically push the updates to your IOC, to your controls, to actually go do some blocking for detecting based off those IOCs. But again, low cost, low risk effort of let's go automate the control updates. Again, you've done the assessment, identified the IOCs that got through, and what threats are associated with those IOCs, and can have a nice easy push to push those IOC updates to the controls. The second thing would be around, say, very specific rules that maybe require some more manual updates, but we'll give some guidance of, hey, this is a WAF rule you need to be updating. This is the kind of things you need to be blocking. And this example here would be custom detection rules. So we run a threat scenario, we identify the threat. Hey, if you want to detect it in your SIM or your XDR, or you can even apply these to EDR and with Sigma rules, but we'll provide this query. It's going to be in a Sigma rule format, but then you can translate it into the specific SIM or XDR platform that you have. Again, optimizing your control, identifying a problem, and then giving you the actions to go optimize that control. So, the next area would be able to understand your exposure, right? To if we run these assessments, we're testing the controls. Let's see, can I reach the crown jewels? What's the likelihood of an attack success if I run my assessment, if I run these threats through my security stack? Can I prove that the attacker can exploit the vulnerability? I want to test my ability for protection and mitigation. I want to measure that potential impact of see, hey, once they did exploit this, where could they go beyond that, right? What kind of privileges could they achieve? Looking for lateral movement, and again, are they able to find their way to the domain controller? And so from this, you can look at the choke points and say, hey, this is the point of the biggest vulnerability, the point where I can go, if I take action here, I can go, have the most impact on my improving security, improving security posture, and not having to treat every vulnerability as if it's the same priority, and can find that choke point where you're most effective, more efficient in improving your security. So the results that our customers are seeing, by doing, daily threat evaluations, weekly control, optimization, maybe monthly deep dives onto, SIM observability. There's definitely tangible results around improving the security posture, and improving the overall security operations. So, our customers who spent 2 to 3 days validating a new threat, that can be updated in 1 to 2 hours, right? Every day we're updating the platform with the latest threats, run an assessment against those new threats to see how good your controls are against those. Doing that proactive, testing and validating of controls over a period of months, you actually, you see the improvement. Customer had an 81% improvement in their security score in just 4 months. Again, testing and then taking action to improve your security controls. Didn't require massive investment of new controls or ripping things out. It's just optimizing what you have. For security teams that do the correlation of analyzing an exploit in testing the controls ability to block an exploit of a vulnerability, we got teams reporting like a 60% increase in the efficiency of how they address and prioritize vulnerabilities because they're filtering out the unexploitable, and they can kind of adjust those in a normal patch cycle as opposed to emergency patch cycles. And then just like the basics of improving the tuning, optimizing. This customer had a 91% improvement in their malicious file detection. Right, this simple steps and simple optimization of your control. And then we're not saying you don't need a pen test, right? You're still going to have those pen tests for audit and compliance for other reasons, but if you're looking for results and to make sure have improvement and continuous improvement, and not have that pen test hit the desk with such a thud next time, we had a customer had a 70% reduction in the vulnerabilities and findings they had between pen tests, right? Because they are able to do the ongoing testing and optimization. So, these are some of our results. I invite you to learn more about Simulate and security validation. You take a look. You have the QR code here. You got the assets available on the platform. And I really appreciate your time. I've got a product expert here on the line with me, Paul Ashwood. He's going to help me handle the Q&A. So, thanks for having me, Mackenzie.
My pleasure. My pleasure. All right. Final poll of the day here. So if you're checking out Simulate, you're curious, you want some more information, just plunk in again what you're looking for in the poll, white paper, data sheets, case studies, etc. And keep those questions coming in. I know we don't always have time for all of them, but Paul, I'm going to pull you out here and start picking your brain if that works for you. Welcome to the stage.
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Excellent.
Okay. Where do we begin? Okay, why don't we start with this one here. Okay, does Simulate use live attack simulations that could put my production environment at risk?
So Simulate actually simulates real-world attack scenarios that are production safe. So they will not cause any harm to your production environment. So our customers are running these simulations to assess the effectiveness of their security controls in their production environment. Our solution provides a comprehensive testing landscape that really mirrors potential threats, but always within the bounds of a safe and controlled environment.
Okay, excellent. So perfectly safe, that's the point, is do it in simulation rather than have to do it on the fly when you're actually attacked.
Yes.
All right. Okay, next one, hot topic always, AI. Steve's asking, how is Simulate leveraging AI in its products?
A good question. So our previous release, a couple of months back, we actually introduced the Simulate AI Copilot. And the Copilot has a number of features, one of which is the ability to really summarize all of the findings and outcomes of the assessments that were run. So you can use the Copilot to get a very quick summarization of the different assessments you have where you're looking at your controls. Other functionality includes the ability to access the knowledge base through queries through the AI Copilot. But I think the best feature that was released was the AI Attack Planner. And it actually gives you the ability to use natural language to say, well, I'm concerned about this particular threat. Maybe it's like scattered spider. So I'm concerned about that threat actor attacking my industry. And through that natural language query, it will actually build an attack scenario from our library of thousands and thousands of different attack types and attack scenarios. It will go ahead and actually build an assessment for you. And that happens in a matter of seconds. And so in addition to that, you could be out there reading an article online, and you can actually take the URL from that article and key it straight into the AI attack planner. And it will actually build an assessment off of the information that exists in that blog. So it really is a time saver for those that utilize the platform, are concerned about a new immediate threat, and want to build something that they can run and determine, hey, are we exposed to that particular threat?
I like that. And so I have a question here that is asking how to simulate validate the detection of an attack. So you talked about kind of like picking up on that, but how do you validate?
So Simulate actually provides technology integrations for all of the leading cybersecurity vendors. This enables you to integrate and connect your existing security investments, like your EDR solution or your SIM solution, into the Simulate platform. So when you run a security control assessment, because of that integration with those controls, you're able to view the findings of the assessment and validate that event and alert data from those controls was actually detected for each of the malicious actions or the IOCs that we tested in the simulation. So the findings provide you with an overall detection ratio that tells you how successful your controls were in detecting the attack. And then the platform also offers you detection rules to help you tune those controls. So in the case of a SIM, you can actually generate a Sigma rule that you could put directly into your SIM. If your SIM was unable to detect some particular actions, put that rule into your SIM, rerun that assessment, and then you should see your detection ratio go up now, because you should now be detecting that threat. So that's also the value of the platform, is to get those rules for your EDR mitigation, for your SIM detections, and be able to push those directly into your controls.
Okay, nice. Excellent. I'm going to keep going here. Next one is from Paul. Paul's asking, in what ways can the detailed reporting provided by Simulate be used to improve an organization's overall security posture, or even to help train employees toward improving their security hygiene?
Great question. We actually have what we call phishing campaigns. So if you were to run some type of training for your employees, you could follow that up by executing one of our phishing campaigns. And this will actually send emails out to your employees. We have some very nicely disguised phishing campaigns that are already developed within the Simulate platform. On the back of those phishing campaigns runs a full kill chain campaign. So we can actually see how far we could penetrate into your environment on the back of one of those phishing campaigns. So you can actually run those, like I said, once you do some training for your employees, maybe 30 days later, you go ahead and run one of these phishing campaigns and just see how well did they actually listen to the training. Can they spot a phishing attack?
Paul, they always send these to me, so now I know that you and the likes of you are at fault.
I'm even guilty of being caught myself, and it will never happen again. So
that's funny. That's wild. Okay, maybe I think we have time for a couple more questions. So next one I've got in the queue rather is, can the customizations available in Simulate's security policies be used to address unique organizational threats? So targeted attacks, regional threats, etc.
Absolutely. I go back to the AI attack planning capability, where you can actually use natural language around the threats that concern you. So if there's particular APT groups that are attacking your industry or your region, if there's a particular platform that's of most concern to you, you can actually configure all of that through our attacks scenario workbench or through the AI attack planner, and you can build very specific custom assessments. And you can run those assessments on a frequent basis, right? They're fully automated assessments. You can actually run those on a weekly basis is typically what we suggest, so that you can monitor and manage any drift that might occur.
Awesome. And I actually had a question from Mark, essentially asking that, does Simulate track and record the assessments to show how a customer environment started and how it looks as they remediate findings? So I guess kind of reporting, tracking, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's a key feature of the platform. We keep all of the assessment results and findings. And in actual fact, we have trend lines. So for the past 10 assessments, and as I said, you could be running these assessments every week, the past 10 assessments. So you're going to get a trend line for how you're performing over the past 10 weeks. And that's really about managing drift. So once you start to tune your controls, get your environment to what you would regard as an acceptable level of risk through the risk scoring that exists in the platform, then you may have a change in your IT environment that all of a sudden causes a spike in your web gateway security control. So you'll see that on the charts, and it allows you to manage that drift and say, hey, something happened here. Somebody has made a change to our web app gateway, for example, that's causing us to no longer prevent and detect the sorts of threats we're looking for. So that gives you the ability to go back in, fix those controls, and get back down to that acceptable level of risk. So you're managing drift through looking at the results of your assessments is kind of a key value of the Simulate platform.
Awesome. Excellent. And I'm going to tack on one final question because I think it's kind of a quick yes or no, but Warren is asking, does Simulate support Apple environments?
Absolutely. So Windows, Mac, Apple, Linux, as well as the cloud environments. So Azure, AWS, GCP, things like Azure Active Directory and those sorts of things. So a lot of different, we support all of the cross-platform capabilities. So you can run different assessments in your Windows environment, in your Mac environment, in your Linux environment, to see how your controls are performing.
Nice. All right. Well, before I let you go, any final words, any call to action if people are curious, they want to learn more, check some things out, or just anything that you think is particularly exciting at Simulate right now you want to remind people of?
Yeah, I mean, there is a good handout, the principle of security validation. In there, you'll see all the different controls that we are testing and validating for, as well as the different attack types and methods that we use. So, we have a library of thousands of different attack scenarios, all the latest things that threat actors are using that we use to validate each and every control, or to validate things like ransomware. If I want to know what our position is on ransomware across all of our controls. So you have the ability to build those type of assessments very quickly. They're all fully automated. They all run in your production environment, as I said. So, I guess the last point is, there's a lot being written at the moment about exposure management as kind of the next evolution of vulnerability management. I think anybody who's out there in the security world understands they're always constantly dealing with a list of thousands and thousands of vulnerabilities. But the big question is what vulnerabilities could be exploited by a threat actor that the security controls won't block? Those are the true exposures. And that's really where the Simulate platform comes into its own, in its ability to validate whether or not the controls can actually block that threat, block that vulnerability. And therefore, it is not a critical exposure if it's blocked by your controls. So yeah, that's my final statement.
Okay, no, that's fantastic. Incredible stuff. I think really cool environments, and looks like we've had a lot of questions. I'm glad we had time and managed to cover quite a few of them. So thank you for doing that and letting us pick your brain here today, Paul.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Well, take care, and we'll hopefully see you back again soon.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Alrighty, everyone. Well, we are about to wrap things up, so definitely do hop over to the handout section if you haven't yet grabbed anything you're looking to review and read later. So again, you've got handouts for Rubrik, CyberArk, Druva, and then the one there from Simulate that Paul just mentioned. You've got that ebook, The Principle of Security Validation. So definitely go check that out. Definitely grab that before we give away our third and final gift card and wrap up today's EcoCast. Now, again, you do need to be live and present to win, but let's give away our third and final prize. This one is going out to Anurag Gupta from Texas. So, Anurag, big congrats. And I'm going to give a quick overview of the three winners today. We had first up Ryan Thomason from Oklahoma. We had Michael Chong from California. And we just had Anurag Gupta from Texas. So huge congrats to all three of you, and we'll be reaching out about that, and we'll be reaching out to 4 lucky winners of those best question gift cards as well after the webinar today. Now, if you are on today's webinar and you had a fantabulous time and you'd like to chat with us about presenting on a future EcoCast, MegaCast, or one of our summits, well, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. You can reach out via email at connect@actualtechmedia.com. Start the conversation there and learn a bit more. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I just want to thank all of our speakers one final time again, from Rubrik, Druva, CyberArk, and Simulate for joining us and making this possible. I also want to thank our keynote speaker, Evgeny Karam. What a crew today. And I want to thank all of you for attending. You know, we can't do this without an audience, and you guys asked some really great questions and really brought up the engagement around this conversation. And well, you know, setting up a layered security program, preparing for cyber attacks, data leaks, breaches, it's not always the lightest topic we want to be thinking about, but you know, that idea of having to protect from things is something that's important. And I really am glad that you all took time out of your days to dive deep into this topic. I hope you've gotten some interesting ideas and tips, and you're feeling a little more prepared or equipped to tackle and implement some of these things at your organization. So most of all, I also hope you had a little bit of fun today. And before you do take off, well, I want to encourage you to mark your calendars for tomorrow, actually. Same time, Thursday, January 30th at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. We've got a short and snappy EcoCast tomorrow covering supporting remote and hybrid workers. So if you have a remote or hybrid environment, you guys are remote first, or if you've got this kind of mixed bag of employees and workers and contractors, well, that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. And it'd be great to have you there. And other than that, I hope to see you again on a webinar soon. And until then, I'm wishing you an absolutely magical rest of your days. So take care, everybody.